everybody, we're going to quickly go over Unit 7, Lesson 1 and Lesson 2. The focus of these two lessons is on the environment of North America. We're going to be working to identify environmental issues in North America and also talking about some of the policies and actions that have been created to affect positive change in our continent. There's going to be a theme that you see in the following lessons throughout the environmental unit, and we'll go over some of those key components to each lesson. So our vocabulary for today is going to be aquaculture, which if you think of aqua, you think water, right? So this vocabulary term is talking about growing plants or animals in either freshwater or marine ecosystems. And then the next word, conservation, you'll hear quite a bit. Conservation is the responsible use and management of natural resources. So back in the 1940s through about the 1970s, there was something called the Green Revolution. And during this Green Revolution, fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides were really used in abundance to increase crop production. More and more plants were being grown with the help of these fertilizers and pesticides, and people thought it was a great thing because we were able to increase the world's food supply. Plants were also being genetically modified so that each plant produced more actual product. So if you were growing tomatoes, they would be modified in order to withstand different plant diseases, and fertilizers and pesticides would help that along. So more and more, let's say, tomatoes were being grown. The issue with that kind of comes when we think about how these fertilizers and pesticides start to affect the environment with respect to our water supply and things like that, because they're not necessarily things you want to put into your body. So the Green Revolution was really all about making more food through agriculture. Part of the Green Revolution was also the idea that soil had to be conserved. And so what this means basically is that the soil where these crops were being grown needed to be treated with care. So a lot of times farmers would rotate the different crops that they were growing, because different crops helped the soil in different ways. So that was also a part of the Green Revolution. Nowadays, when we think about the Green Revolution, we think about something more along the lines of recycling, nature, conservation, a lot of the things in this wordle. So our Green Revolution of today looks a lot different than it did back 50 years ago. The Green Revolution really brought on a period of time where trade was a lot easier between the countries of North America and other countries around the world. Because so much food was being created, it was an economic benefit to be able to send the food other places. So while this helped farmers in North America in the short term, in the long term, the effects of this were really devastating because our soil was being overused, and that led to basically a destruction of the land. So when soil isn't used properly, the land really does suffer. We can do a lot of different things to protect our soil. Overproduction from too much farming and too many crops depletes the nutrients out of our soil, so we don't want to do that. As a result, a lot of times the U.S. government actually pays farmers to not grow crops so that the soil can remain nutritious for future crops. So it's kind of interesting that the government will pay farmers to not grow crops. But an issue that's come about is that Canada and the United States have reduced the money that they pay farmers to not grow anything. These are subsidies. And so one of the issues is that farmers are saying, well, if I can make more money growing things and selling them, I'm going to do that as opposed to taking your subsidies for not growing crops. So there's a lot of different ways we try to protect our soil, and basically overuse is a major issue we're trying to solve. There are some solutions to our agricultural issues. Some of those include development of an economically effective organic agriculture. So organic means made with, grown with not using any pesticides. Also, the development of less polluting pesticides and fertilizers, things that are more environmentally friendly. We can also share information. That's always a good thing, I think, about different types of farming techniques, and publicizing the benefit of using organic products. So going organic is good for the environment as well as for you not ingesting any kind of pesticides. So just like the agricultural products, the forest products of North America are used within the region of our continent and are exported to other countries. So global demand is expected to increase in the future, which is going to put a lot of more stress on our forests. So one of the nice things about North America is that recreational use of forests, like the people we see here hugging this big redwood tree, people are enjoying forests for tourism. And so by promoting tourism in the forests, it basically helps support the idea that conservation is more important than cutting the trees down for different wood products. There are many different factors that threaten and reduce the quality of forests in North America. Some of those are overgrazing, logging, non-native species, which we'll go further in depth a little bit later on, climate change, population growth, pollution, and human-caused wildfires. Sometimes wildfires are okay for forests, but not when they're not intentional. There are a few things we can do to preserve our forests, and part of that is decreasing reliance on forest products. So by cutting down our need, we can also save the forests. We also need to start setting aside more forest lands and protecting them from development, either residential, where they're cutting down the forest to build homes, or for industrial purposes like logging. Raising awareness and educating on cleaner and more efficient production techniques is also key in preserving our forests. Just as the demand for wood supplied by our forests is going to increase as population increases, so is the demand for fresh water. And with urbanization and the growth of agriculture and industry, we really do see a lot of stress on our fresh water supplies. Some threats that our water systems face are pollution, a lot of it from agricultural runoff of the pesticides and herbicides that are used, waste disposal, also dams sometimes will, and water diversion for irrigation of crops can cause different issues with respect to our underground water supplies. And then the pumping of groundwater is also an issue. So there's different ways we can protect our freshwater resources, basically conserving our water, making sure we're not wasting it, and also reducing dependence on chemical agents for agriculture. So going in that organic direction is really going to help not just the soil, but also our water. So fresh water eventually ends up in the sea, and we also have concerns for our marine life. Concerns would include increased pollution, again because of agriculture and industry, also reduced fish populations because of overfishing, and increased potential for oil spills. We need oil, and a lot of times it might be underwater. And so drilling can cause oil spills like the Exxon Valdez and the BP oil spill in in the Gulf of Mexico just recently in your lifetime. So solutions would be replenishing depleted fish populations, so making sure that we're fishing sustainably and not taking so much out of the environment that populations can't replenish themselves. And also, just like everything else, reducing population would help too, but reducing pollution is key. So one of the things we're going to discuss kind of in depth this week is biodiversity. It is the topic for your next Newsella. Newsella 5 is what is biodiversity. And basically biodiversity is the health of an ecosystem that's determined by the number of species living in it. When there's a lot of different species, it means a healthy food chain. And as species start to become threatened or their habitats are destroyed, we really see a decrease in biodiversity, which is a sign of an unhealthy ecosystem. So two main threats to biodiversity are, like I said, habitat destruction. So when your home is destroyed, it's not easy to thrive in your environment, right? If our homes were taken away, it wouldn't be easy to thrive. And then also non-native species. So non-native species are species that don't really belong in that ecosystem. If you see here, this is a picture of a lionfish. Lionfish are not supposed to be found in the waters off the coast of Florida, but they are. And the problem with that is that these fish are predatory. And so like not a lot of non-native species, they come in and they don't fit in with the food chain and they start to destroy the ecosystem because, as we know, in the food chain, everything is connected. So non-native species and habitat destruction are really the enemies to biodiversity. As we wrap up Unit 7, Lesson 1, I just want to emphasize this for you guys. It's the daily choices that we all can make that will improve the world around us now and for the future. So please just remember, I guess as your PSA, to reduce, reuse, and recycle. All right, guys, that's the end of Unit 7, Lesson 1. Thanks, and make sure that you catch Unit 7, Lesson 2 to complete your homework for the night. Bye, everybody.